I will never forget the moment my 7-year-old niece, Emma, looked directly at my 9-year-old son, Tyler, across my mother's Christmas dinner table and said those words that shattered everything. "Grandma told me you're not her real grandson." The entire room went silent. My sister Jessica let out this nervous giggle. My mother Patricia suddenly found her green bean casserole fascinating. My father David just kept cutting his ham like nothing happened. Nobody corrected her. Nobody said a word. I watched Tyler's face crumble as he processed what his cousin had just announced to the whole family. Without saying anything, I stood up, calmly, looked at Tyler and said, "Get your coat, buddy. We're going home." I started packing up our unopened gifts while the family sat there in uncomfortable silence watching us walk out into the snowy December night. The drive home felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Tyler sat in the passenger seat crying quietly, staring out the window at the Christmas lights on houses we passed. I kept my hands gripped tight on the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened and figure out what I was going to say to comfort him. Tyler became my son 3 years ago when I married his mother, Sarah. She had escaped from an abusive relationship with Tyler's biological father, a man who disappeared completely from their lives when Tyler was 6. I didn't just marry Sarah, I chose to become Tyler's dad in every way that mattered. I went through the formal adoption process, gave him my last name, and I've been the only father figure he's ever really known. This kid calls me Dad. We throw a football in the backyard every weekend, I help him with his math homework, and I've been to every single one of his little league games since we became a family. What my family doesn't know, what they've never bothered to ask about or acknowledge, is that I've been sending them a monthly family bonus of $1,500 for the past 2 years. My software consulting business took off after I landed 3 major corporate contracts, and I wanted to help my parents and sister, who always seemed to be struggling with money. I helped pay down my parents' mortgage, covered Jessica's nursing school tuition, and even contributed to Emma's private school costs. Not once in 2 years has anyone thanked me for these payments. They just started expecting the money to arrive like clockwork, treating it as some kind of entitlement, rather than the generous gift it was supposed to be. When we got home, I helped Tyler get ready for bed, told him we'd talk more in the morning, and then sat in my kitchen feeling a mixture of heartbreak and rage. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message from my mother, sent just 20 minutes after we'd walked out of her house. The message read, "The January bonus should arrive by the 3rd like always. Jessica needs extra this month for Emma's winter clothes." I stared at that text for a full minute, feeling something cold settle in my chest. No apology for what happened. No concern for how Tyler felt. No acknowledgement that they had just humiliated a 9-year-old boy at Christmas dinner. Just a casual reminder that my money better keep flowing on schedule. And now Jessica needed extra for Emma, the same little girl they had just used to deliver a calculated insult to my son. I called Sarah and told her what happened. She was furious, of course, but also heartbroken for Tyler. We talked about how to handle this, how to explain to a 9-year-old boy that some adults can be cruel and petty, especially family members who should know better. Sarah had dealt with family rejection before having been pretty much disowned by her own parents when she left Tyler's biological father. She understood the particular sting of blood relatives who choose sides against innocent children. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the family gatherings over the past 2 years, all the times I noticed little comments and looks directed at Tyler. The way my parents would ask about Tyler's behavior after every visit. How Jessica would make remarks about Tyler being a lot to handle or different from Emma. I had chalked it up to normal family dynamics, but now I realized there was something much darker happening. I thought about the Christmas gifts under their tree. Tyler had spent weeks working on handmade cards for his grandparents, an aunt carefully writing out messages about how much he loved them and how happy he was to be part of the family. My parents had opened his gifts with polite smiles, the same way you'd receive a gift from a neighbor's kid. No real warmth, no genuine affection. And now I understood why. The more I replayed the evening, the angrier I became. Emma didn't come up with those words on her own. 7-year-olds don't spontaneously decide to announce family genealogy at dinner unless someone has been coaching them. Someone had specifically told Emma that Tyler wasn't a real grandson, and they had done it with the intention of having her repeat it in front of everyone. This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate humiliation, planned and executed with my innocent son as the target. I pulled up my banking app and looked at the automatic transfer I had set up 2 years ago. $1,500 sent to my parents' account on the 3rd of every month without fail. $36,000 over 2 years, plus additional amounts for special occasions and emergencies. Money that had apparently bought me nothing but contempt and given them a platform to feel superior while still expecting my financial support. As I sat there in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, I made a decision. If my family wanted to treat Tyler like he wasn't really family, then they could find out what it felt like to lose the financial support of someone who apparently wasn't really family either. But I wasn't going to just cut off their money. I was going to make sure they understood exactly what they had lost and why. The next morning, I woke up with a plan forming in my mind. Before I did anything rash, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I remembered that Jessica had left her iPad at our house during Thanksgiving dinner, and it was still sitting on my home office desk forgotten. Since it was synced to the family iCloud account, I realized I might be able to see their text messages and understand what was really going on behind the scenes. I powered up the iPad, and sure enough, it automatically connected to the family's shared message group. What I found made my stomach turn. There was a group chat called Real Family that included my parents Jessica and her husband Mark, but notably excluded me. 2 years of messages, thousands of them, and I was about to discover exactly what my family really thought about Tyler and me. I started scrolling through recent messages, working my way backwards, through months of conversations. What I found was worse than I had imagined. There were constant complaints about Tyler's behavior during family visits. Jessica writing things like, "The kid never sits still during dinner, so exhausting," and "I hate when they come over because Tyler always gets Emma wound up." My mother responding with messages like, "I know, but we have to pretend we enjoy having them here." But it got worse. Much worse. I found messages where they openly discussed how uncomfortable Tyler made them feel, because he wasn't real family. Jessica had written, "It's so weird having to buy Christmas gifts for Sarah's kid. Like he's not even related to us, but we have to pretend he's a grandson." My father had responded, "At least Seth's money is convenient, even though we have to put up with the baggage." The word baggage. That's how they referred to my son. A 9-year-old boy who had done nothing but try to love them and be part of their family. I kept reading, feeling sicker with every message. There were jokes about how Tyler looked nothing like our family complaints about his energy level, and constant references to him as Sarah's kid, or the boy, instead of using his name. They discussed strategies for managing family gatherings to minimize their interaction with Tyler, and they complained about having to include him in family photos. Then I found messages from 3 months ago that made everything clear. My mother had written, "Jessica, you need to start working on Emma. Help her understand that Tyler isn't really her cousin. If we can get the children to understand the situation naturally, maybe Seth will start getting the hint." Jessica had responded, "Good idea. I'll start explaining to Emma that Tyler is different from our family." And there it was. They had been coaching Emma to exclude Tyler teaching a 7-year-old girl to be cruel to a 9-year-old boy, all in service of some twisted plan to make us feel unwelcome enough to stop coming around. But they still wanted my monthly payments to continue flowing. The final message thread I found was from 3 days before Christmas. My father had written, "Maybe if we make it obvious enough that the boy doesn't belong, Seth will get the hint and stop bringing him around." Then we can enjoy family gatherings again without walking on eggshells." My mother had responded, "Exactly. I'm tired of pretending that child is my grandson when everyone can see he's not really family." Jessica's response was the most damning. "I already talked to Emma about it. She understands now that Tyler isn't really her cousin, like the kids from Dad's side. She's excited to help make Christmas dinner more comfortable for real family." I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, feeling a combination of rage and betrayal that I had never experienced before. They had weaponized a 7-year-old child to hurt my son. They had turned Christmas dinner into an ambush carefully planned and executed to maximize the humiliation. And through it all, they had been expecting my money to keep arriving on schedule. I took screenshots of everything, saving the evidence to my phone and computer. Then I kept digging, looking for more context about their attitudes and plans. What I found was 2 years of casual cruelty with my family, treating Tyler like an unwelcome burden, while simultaneously treating my financial support as their due. They had created an entire narrative where I was somehow obligated to fund their lifestyle, while they felt free to emotionally abuse my child. I called my lawyer and made an appointment for that afternoon. I also started documenting everything I could remember about past family interactions, all the small slights and comments that I had previously dismissed as normal family friction. With the context of these messages, I could see a clear pattern of exclusion and hostility that had been building for years. The most heartbreaking part was reading Emma's name in these conversations. They had corrupted an innocent child, teaching her to be cruel and exclusive, all to serve their adult petty jealousies and prejudices. Emma genuinely loved playing with Tyler during family visits, but they had systematically poisoned her mind against him. The little girl who had delivered that devastating blow at Christmas dinner was as much a victim as Tyler was. By the time Sarah and Tyler returned from their morning at the park, I had a complete picture of what we were dealing with. This wasn't just family drama or misunderstandings. This was a coordinated campaign of exclusion and emotional abuse, funded ironically by my own generosity. My family had been playing a long game, taking my money while working to drive away my son, and they had finally made their move at Christmas dinner. I looked at Tyler playing with his new Christmas toys in the living room, completely unaware of the extent of the conspiracy against him, and I knew exactly what I had to do. If my family wanted to find out what it felt like to be excluded, I was about to give them a masterclass in consequences. That afternoon, I sat down with my accountant and my lawyer to conduct a complete financial audit of everything I had given to my family over the past 2 years. What we discovered was staggering. The monthly $1,500 transfers totaled $36,000. But that was just the beginning. There had been emergency payments when my father's car broke down, funding for Jessica's textbooks, and nursing program expenses contributions to my parents' home renovation projects, and countless smaller amounts for birthdays, holidays, and various crises. When we tallied everything up, including the indirect support, like paying for family dinners and Emma's extracurricular activities, the total came to over $50,000 in 2 years. $50,000 that I had willingly given to support family members who viewed my son as an unwelcome burden and my generosity as an entitlement. But the financial discoveries got worse. My lawyer suggested we run credit checks and public record searches to understand their overall financial picture, and what we found was infuriating. My parents had been telling neighbors and friends that Patricia's successful investments had funded their home renovations and lifestyle improvements. They were taking credit for financial success that came entirely from my contributions, building a reputation in their community as savvy money managers, while portraying themselves as generous grandparents to friends. Jessica had been even more creative with her deceptions. She had posted on social media about receiving a partial scholarship for nursing school, sharing inspirational posts about working hard to achieve her educational goals. In reality, I had been funding her entire program. She had also been telling her nursing school classmates that she came from a wealthy family, while simultaneously applying for need-based financial aid by understating her actual resources. My lawyer then discovered something that made my blood pressure spike. My parents had claimed me as financially dependent on them for tax purposes last year despite being the one supporting them. They had somehow convinced their tax preparer that I was living in their house and relying on their financial support when the exact opposite was true. This had given them significant tax benefits while potentially creating problems for my own tax situation. Even worse, Jessica had been using my address to qualify for state financial aid programs, claiming she lived in my higher income district to access better funding opportunities, while actually living in a different county. She had been committing fraud using my home address and forging documents that suggested I supported her residency claims. The final discovery came when my business partner called me that evening with a disturbing story. 6 months earlier, my mother had contacted our office claiming to be my financial advisor. She had told our receptionist that she was helping with family financial planning and needed information about my contract's income projections and business growth. Our office had declined to share any information without my direct authorization, but the attempt revealed something chilling about my mother's mindset. She had been secretly trying to monitor my business success to calculate exactly how much more money she could extract from me. The monthly $1,500 wasn't enough. She was researching my earning potential to determine whether she could increase her demands, all while coaching her granddaughter to humiliate my son at family gatherings. I spent that evening going through my financial records with a fine-tooth comb, documenting every payment, every gift, every act of generosity I had extended to my family. I created a detailed spreadsheet showing not just the money, but the time, effort, and emotional investment I had put into maintaining these relationships. Family dinners I had hosted and paid for birthday parties. I had funded emergency repairs. I had covered vacations. I had subsidized. The pattern was clear. My family had developed an entire lifestyle funded by my success while simultaneously working to exclude and humiliate the child I loved most in the world. They had been living a lie, taking credit for financial stability they hadn't earned while plotting to drive away the source of their newfound prosperity. What bothered me most was the calculated nature of their deception. This wasn't just casual ingratitude or thoughtless behavior. They had been actively deceiving financial institutions, government agencies, and their social networks about the source of their money. They had been committing fraud while funding it with my generosity, and they had been planning Tyler's humiliation while cashing my checks. I realized that my family had been playing a much longer and more sophisticated game than I had understood. They wanted the benefits of my success without the inconvenience of accepting my chosen family. They wanted to maintain their fantasy of being the real family while exploiting the financial resources of the family member they considered an outsider. As I reviewed everything that night, I felt a cold clarity settling over me. I had been enabling their cruelty by rewarding it with financial support. Every month, I had been funding the very people who were working to emotionally damage my child. I had been paying for the privilege of having my son excluded and humiliated by people who saw him as nothing more than an obstacle to their comfort. The next morning, I was ready to begin dismantling the financial house of cards they had built on my generosity. But I wasn't going to just cut them off. I was going to make sure they understood exactly how much they had lost, and I was going to ensure that their fraud and deception had real consequences. If they wanted to learn what it meant to be excluded from family benefits, I was prepared to be an excellent teacher. The first stop on my fact-finding mission was the Riverside Community Center, where my mother had been volunteering for the past year. Patricia had been telling everyone in the family about her generous donations to their food pantry program, proudly describing her commitment to helping local families in need. She often mentioned this volunteer work at family gatherings, portraying herself as a pillar of community charity and civic engagement. When I walked into the community center, the volunteer coordinator, a friendly woman named Linda, immediately recognized me from family photos my mother had shown around. "Seth, how wonderful to meet you in person. Your mother talks about you constantly, and we cannot thank you enough for your family's ongoing generosity to our food pantry." I was confused for a moment until Linda pulled out a donation record book and showed me the monthly entries. For the past 18 months, there had been $1,500 donations arriving on the 15th of every month, listed as coming from Patricia Chen on behalf of the Chen Family Foundation. My mother had been taking complete credit for donations that came automatically from my business account, a charitable giving program I had set up and completely forgotten about. "Your mother is one of our most valued volunteers," Linda continued, "and the families we serve have benefited tremendously from your family's commitment. The monthly donations have allowed us to expand our fresh produce program and add weekend meal packs for children. Patricia always speaks so humbly about your family's financial success, but these donations have literally changed lives." I felt sick. Not only had my mother been taking credit for my charitable giving, but she had invented an entire fake family foundation to explain the money. She had been building a reputation in the community as a generous philanthropist, while the actual funds came from the son whose child she was actively working to exclude from family gatherings. My next stop was Jessica's nursing school, where I had a more complicated conversation with the financial aid office. After explaining my concerns and providing documentation, I learned that Jessica had been misrepresenting her financial situation in multiple ways. She had listed me as a financial dependent who relied on family support rather than disclosing that I was the source of her educational funding. She had also claimed poverty-level family income while living a lifestyle funded entirely by my contributions. The financial aid director, a stern woman named Margaret, reviewed Jessica's file while I waited. "This is quite concerning," she said finally. "Your sister has been receiving needs-based aid while apparently having access to significant family financial resources. If these payments from you have been regular and substantial, she should have disclosed them as family support. This could constitute aid fraud." I provided documentation of all the payments I had made for Jessica's education, including tuition books, supplies, and living expenses. The total over 2 years was $28,000 money that had allowed Jessica to qualify for additional aid by understating her actual financial resources. Margaret informed me that the school would be launching an investigation and that Jessica might be required to repay improperly received aid. My final community stop was the most revealing. I visited Westfield Elementary, where Emma attended private school. The tuition was $24,000 per year, money that Jessica and Mark supposedly couldn't afford on their combined salaries. I had been contributing $800 monthly to help cover these costs, believing I was helping my niece access better educational opportunities. The school's development director, a polished woman named Catherine, was happy to meet with a member of the generous Chen family. She pulled out records showing that Jessica had been telling the school that Emma's education was funded by her successful investment advisor brother and his family trust fund. According to their records, I was some kind of wealthy family patriarch managing inherited money rather than a working professional supporting his struggling sister. "Emma's parents have been such wonderful advocates for our scholarship program," Catherine explained. "Jessica often speaks at our fundraising events about the importance of family investment in education. She's been inspiring other families to make similar commitments to their children's futures." The irony was overwhelming. Jessica had been using my money to fund Emma's education while simultaneously coaching that same child to humiliate Tyler at family gatherings. She'd been building her reputation as an advocate for children's education while teaching her daughter to exclude and hurt another child. The same money that was paying for Emma's opportunities to learn and grow was being used to fund a campaign of emotional abuse against my son. As I drove home from these meetings, I felt a deep sense of clarity. about what my family had become. They hadn't just been taking my money. They had been building false identities and reputations based on my generosity. They had been lying to their communities, their institutions, and their social networks about the source of their financial stability. Most importantly, they had been using the fruits of my success to elevate themselves while working to tear down and exclude my child. The scope of their deception was breathtaking. My mother had created an entirely fictional family foundation and was being honored in the community as a philanthropist. Jessica had built a false narrative about family wealth and investment success while committing aid fraud at her school. My parents had been claiming financial dependency relationships that were the reverse of reality. All of this had been funded by my labor and generosity while they planned and executed Tyler's humiliation. That evening, I sat down with all the documentation I had gathered and created a comprehensive picture of their fraud, deception, and betrayal. It wasn't just family drama anymore. This was systematic financial fraud, identity theft, and emotional abuse of a child, all wrapped up in a package of fake charity and false community standing. I realized that my family hadn't just betrayed Tyler and me personally. They had betrayed every institution and community member who had honored and trusted them based on false information. The community center volunteers who had thanked my mother for her generosity, the nursing school administrators who had celebrated Jessica's perseverance, the private school staff who had admired our family's educational commitment. All of them had been deceived. My family had built their enhanced social standing on a foundation of lies, taking credit for success they hadn't earned while planning to exclude the family members whose generosity made their lifestyle possible. They wanted the reputation and respect that came with financial success, but they didn't want the responsibilities or relationships that came with actual family bonds. As I prepared for the next phase of my response, I knew I wasn't just fighting for Tyler anymore. I was fighting for truth, accountability, and consequences. My family was about to learn that building a fake life on someone else's generosity has costs, and those costs become due when the generosity ends. Instead of simply redirecting their monthly payment like an angry emotional reaction, I decided to implement a comprehensive plan that would address every aspect of their deception and fraud. This wasn't going to be just about money. This was going to be about truth, consequences, and accountability for years of lies and manipulation. First, I contacted my lawyer and had him draft letters to revoke any financial authorizations and alert relevant institutions about fraudulent applications. The letter to my parents' bank detailed their false loan application that used my income as guaranteed collateral without my knowledge or permission. The letter to Jessica's nursing school provided complete documentation of her aid fraud and misrepresentation of family financial resources. Each letter was professional, factual, and devastating. I then redirected my automatic monthly charitable donation to go directly to the Riverside Community Center, but instead of hiding the change, I arranged for the donations to be made explicitly in Tyler's name. I wanted the community to know that their beloved philanthropist, Patricia, had never actually contributed $1 of her own money, and that her grandson, Tyler, the child she refused to acknowledge, was the real source of their new funding. The monthly $1,500 that had been flowing to my parents was redirected to a college fund for Tyler, managed by an independent financial advisor. I wanted this money to go toward my son's future rather than subsidizing people who viewed him as unwelcome baggage. But I didn't just make the change quietly. I sent detailed letters to each family member explaining exactly what they had lost and why. The letter to my parents was particularly thorough. Dear Mom and Dad, I wrote, over the past 2 years, you have received $36,000 in direct monthly payments, plus an additional $14,000 in emergency funds, home improvement contributions, and special occasion gifts. Additionally, I have been funding monthly donations to the Riverside Community Center that you have been claiming credit for totaling $27,000. The total financial support you have received from me is $77,000. This support ended permanently on January 3rd when you chose to use my 7-year-old niece to humiliate my 9-year-old son at Christmas dinner. Emma's announcement that Tyler isn't your real grandson was not an accident or a child's mistake. Based on communications I have reviewed, this was a planned and coordinated attack on an innocent child designed to make us feel unwelcome at family gatherings, while expecting my financial support to continue. You should also know that I have contacted your bank regarding the loan you obtained using false income information, and I have revoked any implied authorization to use my financial status as collateral for your debts. I have also corrected your fraudulent tax filings that claimed me as financially dependent on you. These corrections may result in penalties and interest charges for which you will be solely responsible. The letter to Jessica was equally detailed. Dear Jessica, I wrote, over the past 2 years, I have provided you with $28,000 in direct educational support, plus an additional $9,600 in monthly contributions to Emma's private school tuition. I have also provided emergency funding for your family's needs and supported your participation in our family gatherings. This support ended when I discovered your role in coaching Emma to deliver a calculated insult to Tyler at Christmas dinner. Your text messages reveal that you view my financial contributions as convenient while seeing my son as unwelcome baggage. You have been committing financial aid fraud by failing to disclose my support while claiming poverty to your educational institutions. I have provided complete documentation of your aid fraud to Westfield Community College's Financial Aid Office. You may be required to repay improperly received benefits, and your enrollment status may be affected. I have also ended my contributions to Emma's private school as I refuse to fund educational opportunities for a child whose parents are teaching her to be cruel to other children. But the letters were only the beginning. I'd been recording phone conversations with my family members for several months, something that is completely legal in our state, with single-party consent. After becoming suspicious about their attitudes toward Tyler, I had started documenting their conversations to better understand the family dynamics. What I had recorded was even worse than the text messages I had found. I had audio of my mother coaching Emma on what to say about Tyler during phone calls. Remember, sweetie, Tyler isn't really your cousin like the children from Grandpa's side of the family. He's different. You don't have to include him in cousin activities. I had recordings of Jessica laughing about training her daughter to put the boy in his place and discussing strategies to make family gatherings uncomfortable enough that we would stop attending. The most damning recording was from a conversation 2 weeks before Christmas, where my father said, if we can make it clear enough that the boy doesn't belong, maybe Seth will take the hint and leave him home. Then we can have real family time without walking on eggshells. Jessica had responded with laughter, saying, Emma's excited to help. She understands now that Tyler isn't really family. I sent copies of these recordings to my Uncle Robert, my father's older brother, who serves as the informal patriarch of our extended family. Uncle Robert controls access to the family vacation home on Lake Michigan and organizes the annual family reunion that brings together cousins, aunts, uncles, and extended family from across the Midwest. He has always been respected as the family voice of wisdom and moral authority. Uncle Robert called me within hours of receiving the recordings. His voice was shaking with anger. Seth, I am appalled and embarrassed by what I heard on those recordings. This behavior is not representative of our family values, and it will not be tolerated. Your son Tyler has always been welcome in this family, and anyone who suggests otherwise does not speak for the rest of us. He continued, I am immediately revoking your parents' and Jessica's access to the family vacation home. They will not be invited to any family gatherings that I organize, including the annual reunion. I am also sharing these recordings with other family members so they understand what has been happening. This kind of cruelty toward a child is unacceptable, regardless of the family dynamics involved. Within days, the recordings had been shared throughout our extended family network. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who had been unaware of the situation were horrified by what they heard. Several family members called me to apologize for not recognizing the exclusion that Tyler had been experiencing and to explicitly welcome him to family events. The response was swift and decisive. My cousin David, who hosts an annual Christmas party, called to specifically invite Tyler and to let him know that he would be introduced to everyone as our newest cousin. My Aunt Margaret, who organizes family birthday celebrations, sent Tyler a belated birthday card with a note saying, "I'm sorry I didn't know about the family difficulties. You will always be welcomed and celebrated as part of our family." My parents found themselves suddenly excluded from family events they had attended for decades. Jessica and Mark discovered that their family relationships were more fragile than they had realized. Emma, innocent victim of her parents' manipulation, was welcomed by the extended family, while her parents faced the consequences of their choices. The strategic counterattack was working exactly as planned. Instead of just being angry and cutting off money, I had documented their fraud, exposed their lies, and mobilized the larger family network to hold them accountable. They weren't just losing my financial support. They were losing their community standing, their family relationships, and their false reputations built on my generosity. But this was still just the beginning. The real consequences were yet to come. Within 2 weeks of Uncle Robert's intervention, the consequences of my family's deception began cascading through every aspect of their lives. The extended family's response was more severe than I had anticipated, with relatives who had known my parents for decades expressing shock and disgust at their treatment of Tyler. Uncle Robert followed through immediately on his promises. He sent formal letters disinviting my parents and Jessica from the family vacation home permanently. The annual family reunion, held every summer at a rented camp in northern Michigan, would proceed without them. More significantly, he shared the recordings with key family members who controlled other family traditions and gatherings. My cousin Lisa, who hosts the annual 4th of July celebration that has been a family tradition for 15 years, called my parents directly to inform them they were no longer welcome. "What I heard on those recordings was disgusting," she told them. "You coached a 7-year-old to be cruel to a 9-year-old boy, and you did it while taking money from his father. That is not the kind of behavior our family tolerates." At Jessica's nursing school, the investigation into her financial aid fraud moved quickly. Once the administrators had complete documentation of her misrepresented income and resources, Margaret from the financial aid office called me with an update. "Your sister will be required to repay $18,000 in improperly received aid. Her enrollment is under review, and she may face academic probation or dismissal, depending on the severity of the violations." The investigation also revealed that Jessica had been claiming poverty while posting social media photos of expensive vacations and luxury purchases funded by my contributions. The contrast between her aid applications, claiming financial hardship, and her Instagram posts showing designer clothing and expensive restaurants was damning evidence of intentional fraud. Jessica's husband, Mark, who had been unaware of the extent of my financial support, was furious when he learned the truth. He had been working overtime to help support their family's lifestyle, believing they were struggling financially. When he discovered that Jessica had been receiving $1,500 monthly from me while telling him they needed to budget carefully, he felt completely betrayed. Mark filed for legal separation within a week of learning about Jessica's deception. In their separation paperwork, he cited financial infidelity and misrepresentation of family resources as grounds for ending the marriage. He also requested primary custody of Emma, arguing that Jessica's willingness to coach their daughter in cruelty demonstrated poor parental judgment. The custody battle revealed even more about Jessica's character. Mark's lawyer presented evidence that Jessica had been systematically teaching Emma to exclude and hurt other children based on family status. Text messages between Jessica and other mothers revealed that she had been encouraging Emma to form exclusive friendships and to avoid children from broken homes or non-traditional families. Emma, caught in the middle of her parents' divorce, didn't understand why her family was falling apart. The 7-year-old girl who had delivered that cruel Christmas announcement was now asking her father why mommy was sad all the time and why daddy didn't live with them anymore. In a heartbreaking phone call, Emma called me crying one evening. "Uncle Seth, did I do something wrong? Mommy and daddy are fighting and mommy says it's because of things I said about Tyler. I didn't mean to hurt Tyler. I like playing with him. Can Tyler come play with me again?" Mark had encouraged Emma to make this call as part of their family counseling sessions. He wanted his daughter to understand the consequences of her actions, while also showing her that Tyler was still welcome to play with her. "Emma has been asking about Tyler constantly," Mark explained. "She's confused about why the families aren't getting together anymore. I've been working with a counselor to help her understand what happened without making her feel guilty for being manipulated by adults." The conversation with Emma broke my heart. This innocent child had been weaponized by adults who should have protected her innocence. She had become both a perpetrator and a victim of their cruelty, used as a tool to hurt Tyler while being taught values that would damage her own character development. My parents' situation deteriorated rapidly once their loan fraud was discovered. The bank called the loan immediately when they learned that my income had been falsely represented as collateral. My parents faced foreclosure proceedings on their home and had to hire a lawyer to fight the fraud charges. The $40,000 they had borrowed against my false income guarantee had been spent on a luxury cruise and a new car, leaving them with no way to repay the loan. The community center's discovery that Patricia had never actually donated any money led to her immediate removal from her volunteer position. Linda, the volunteer coordinator, called to inform me of the situation. "We've had to ask your mother to step down from her volunteer role. The other volunteers feel betrayed by her misrepresentation of the donation source. We're grateful that the donations will continue in Tyler's name, but we cannot have volunteers who build their reputations on false claims." Patricia's removal from the community center was particularly devastating because it had been her primary social outlet and source of self-esteem. She had built friendships and earned respect through volunteer work that was entirely based on taking credit for my generosity. When the truth was revealed, those relationships crumbled. My father's health began to deteriorate under the stress of their financial and social collapse. David had always taken pride in being seen as a successful provider and respected community member. The discovery that their comfortable lifestyle had been funded by their son, whom they had been excluding from family gatherings, was a humiliation he couldn't handle. Jessica, facing divorce, educational sanctions, and social ostracism, attempted to reach out to me through various family members. She sent messages through cousins, asking for forgiveness and requesting that I continue Emma's school funding for the child's sake. Each message promised that she had learned her lesson and would welcome Tyler as family going forward. But I had learned an important lesson about boundaries and consequences. These weren't people who had made a simple mistake or shown poor judgment in a moment of stress. They had conducted a 2-year campaign of exclusion and manipulation while taking my money and lying to their communities about the source of their financial stability. They had weaponized a child to hurt another child, and they had done it while expecting my support to continue. The consequences they were facing weren't cruel revenge. They were the natural results of their own choices and actions. I hadn't destroyed their relationships or their reputations. I had simply stopped enabling their deception and allowed the truth to be revealed. The relationships they were losing had been built on lies, and the financial stability they had enjoyed had been based on my generosity, while they actively worked against my family's well-being. As I watched the cascade of consequences unfold, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. I was sad that it had come to this, that people I had loved and supported had been capable of such cruelty. But I was also relieved that Tyler would no longer be subjected to their manipulation and exclusion, and that their lies were finally being exposed. The stage was set for the final act of this family drama, and I was ready to determine what, if any, relationships could be rebuilt from the wreckage they had created. 3 months later, the landscape of our family had been completely transformed. My parents had been forced to sell their house and move into a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town. The foreclosure proceedings had been settled, but their credit was ruined and their comfortable retirement lifestyle was gone. Jessica had dropped out of nursing school after being required to repay her fraudulent aid, and she was working 2 part-time jobs at a grocery store and a local restaurant while fighting Mark for custody of Emma. But something unexpected had also emerged from the wreckage. Uncle Robert had taken a leadership role in rebuilding family relationships based on truth rather than deception. He organized a series of family gatherings specifically designed to welcome Tyler and help him understand that the cruel treatment he had received didn't represent the values of our larger family. At the first gathering, Uncle Robert made a point of introducing Tyler to everyone as my great-nephew Tyler, who is an important part of our family. He had clearly spoken to everyone in advance because each family member made an effort to engage with Tyler personally and express their happiness to include him in family activities. My cousin David's 8-year-old son immediately bonded with Tyler over their shared love of baseball, and they spent the afternoon throwing a ball and talking about their favorite players. My Aunt Margaret brought Tyler a belated birthday gift and apologized for not being more aware of what had been happening at family gatherings. Family is about love and acceptance, she told him, not about biology or blood relationships. The extended family's embrace of Tyler was genuine and healing. These were people who had known me since childhood and who understood that Tyler was my son in every way that mattered. They had been unaware of the exclusion and cruelty he had been experiencing. But once they learned the truth, they immediately stepped up to correct the situation. Emma's situation had stabilized somewhat after Mark was awarded primary custody. With the help of family counseling, she was beginning to understand that the things she had been taught about Tyler were wrong and hurtful. Mark had been working hard to undo the damage Jessica had done to their daughter's understanding of family relationships. Emma attended the family gathering with Mark, and I watched carefully as she interacted with Tyler. At first, she was shy and uncertain, clearly remembering the Christmas dinner incident and feeling ashamed of her role in hurting him. But Tyler, with the resilience of children, approached her with forgiveness and an invitation to play. "Do you want to see the new video game Uncle Robert got me?" Tyler asked Emma, offering her a chance to rebuild their cousin relationship. Emma's face lit up with relief and happiness as she followed him to the game room. Mark and I watched from a distance as the 2 children began to repair the bond that had been damaged by adult manipulation. The most challenging situation involved my parents. After 3 months of financial hardship and social isolation, my mother finally called me crying and asking for forgiveness. "Seth, I know what we did was terrible. I understand why you're angry, and I understand why you cut off our support. I just want you to know that I love Tyler and I love you, and I'm sorry for everything that happened." Patricia's voice was broken and genuine in a way I had never heard before. "I was jealous," she admitted. "When you married Sarah and adopted Tyler, I felt like you were choosing them over us. I felt like your attention and care were going to people who weren't really family, and I resented having to share you. It was stupid and selfish, and I turned that resentment into something cruel toward an innocent child." She continued, "I convinced myself that Tyler wasn't really my grandson because it was easier than accepting that I was being petty and jealous. Jessica fed into those feelings, and together, we created something toxic. We taught Emma to be cruel because we were too cowardly to address our own feelings directly. The conversation was difficult but necessary. I listened as my mother explained her thought process and acknowledged the extent of her mistakes. She had been seeing a counselor since the family crisis began, working to understand her own motivations and to develop healthier ways of processing family changes. "I don't expect forgiveness immediately," Patricia said, "and I don't expect you to trust me with Tyler until I've proven that I've changed. But I want you to know that I understand what I did wrong, and I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to earn back your trust and Tyler's love." Jessica's call came a week later, and it was even more emotional. She had lost her marriage, her educational opportunities, and her financial stability as a direct result of her choices. "I destroyed my family because I was bitter and small-minded," she sobbed over the phone. "Mark was right to leave me. Emma is better off with him because I taught her to be cruel to a child who never did anything but love us." Jessica's voice was raw with pain and regret. "I was so focused on maintaining some fake idea of what family should look like that I forgot what family actually means. Tyler has been nothing but sweet and loving toward all of us, and I repaid that by turning him into an outsider. I used my own daughter as a weapon against an innocent child." She asked if there was any way she could begin to make amends, any way she could demonstrate that she had learned from her mistakes. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," Jessica said. "But Emma keeps asking about Tyler, and I want her to understand that what I taught her was wrong. I want her to grow up knowing that love makes family, not blood." After long conversations with Sarah and Tyler, we decided to take small steps toward rebuilding these relationships. Not because we had forgotten what happened, but because Tyler deserved to have grandparents and extended family members who could love and accept him genuinely. The process would be slow and carefully monitored with clear boundaries and expectations. We arranged for my mother to attend family therapy sessions where she could work on her relationship with Tyler under professional guidance. She would need to publicly acknowledge Tyler as her grandson at the next family gathering and demonstrate consistent acceptance over time before any financial support would be considered. Jessica would need to complete her own counseling and make amends to the various institutions she had defrauded before any family relationships could be rebuilt. Emma's relationship with Tyler would be supervised and supported to ensure that both children could heal from the damage that had been done. The extended family stepped up beautifully to fill the gaps while these relationships were being rebuilt. Uncle Robert had become a surrogate grandfather to Tyler, including him in fishing trips and family traditions. My cousin Lisa made sure Tyler felt welcomed at every gathering, and other family members had embraced him with genuine warmth and acceptance. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that this crisis had actually strengthened our family bonds in unexpected ways. Tyler now understood that he was genuinely loved and accepted by most of his extended family. He had learned that standing up for yourself and setting boundaries was important, and he had seen that actions have consequences. The family that emerged from this crisis was smaller but healthier. Relationships were based on truth rather than financial obligation. Love was demonstrated through actions rather than empty words. And Tyler was finally experiencing the unconditional family acceptance that every child deserves. The final resolution came 6 months later at the annual family reunion. Tyler ran around the camp playing with his cousins, fully integrated into the family activities, and clearly feeling loved and welcomed. My parents attended as guests, working to rebuild their relationship with Tyler slowly and respectfully. Jessica was not yet ready to attend, still working on her own healing and making amends for her choices. Emma, now living primarily with Mark and receiving counseling, had become Tyler's close playmate again. The two children had forgiven each other and moved forward with the resilience that children possess when adults stop poisoning their relationships. As I watched Tyler roast marshmallows with Uncle Robert and laugh with his cousins around the campfire, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what family should look like: genuine love, authentic acceptance, and relationships based on choice rather than obligation. The life lesson was clear. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to refuse to enable their worst behaviors. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's necessary for authentic relationships to flourish. And sometimes people need to experience real consequences before they can recognize the value of what they've lost. Tyler looked over at me from across the campfire and smiled, completely at peace in his place within our family. That smile made every difficult decision worth it. He was finally surrounded by people who chose to love him genuinely, and he would never again have to question his worth or his place in our family. If you've ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of your generosity, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. How did you handle relatives who expected your support while treating you poorly? Did you find that consequences helped them change their behavior? Or did you have to build new family relationships entirely? Your experiences could help other viewers who are struggling with similar family dynamics. Thank you for watching this story about standing up for the people we love most. If this video resonated with you, please hit that like button to help other people find it. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships and personal growth. And please share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of setting boundaries and protecting the people who matter most. Remember, family isn't just about blood relationships. It's about the people who choose to love and support each other through good times and bad. Sometimes we have to fight to protect those bonds. But when we do, we create the kind of family that truly matters.